Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, your 10-minute insight into the conversations shaping the accounting profession. My name is Jon Hubbard. I'm a shareholder and Chief Growth Officer here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Arianna Campbell, shareholder and our Chief Operating Officer. And Arianna and I just wrapped up facilitating our Spring Learning and Development Circle. So we wanted to highlight for you some of the key conversations that are happening in the learning and development arena. We had about 20 firms represented from all around the country, and we were tackling all the topics related to learning and development. And in a lot of ways, learning and development leaders, we would categorize as some of the key change agents in firms today. Because not only are they responding to the needs in the firm and training and developing the firm, they're also setting the standard and looking out into the future and saying, what type of capabilities do we need to be developing inside our firm so we continue to have a strong future? So, Arianna, one of my first questions maybe for us to discuss is around what would you say were some of the most engaging conversations we had over the last day and a half?
Yeah, well, we covered a lot of different topics during our time together, but I think one that really stood out was the conversation that we had around onboarding for new hires versus experienced hires, and some of the things that we really want to make sure that we're paying attention to as far as the differences. And I think one of the things that the firms really highlighted is that they have a strong foundation in their new hire onboarding, but there were a lot of insights and things that they could add into that process, into even how they're thinking about that to continue to support those new hires, thinking about how they're tailoring the training and the experience to them, and really just overall, how can they make it work well for the firm to support when people are being hired, having them be onboarded in a way that creates less friction. But along with that, I think a really key insight is the additional support that we could be providing for our experienced new hires. An insight was that a lot of times, so with no malicious intent, we know that those experienced new hires have just that experience. So when it comes to working in our firms, maybe we don't put the same amount of focused attention on what they need in that different context. And so I think it was really interesting to talk about the cultural support that they need to be able to fit well into the firm culture and really be part of that. Thinking about what are the different trainings from a software perspective that an experienced hire may need versus a newer hire, or even thinking about the role-specific things that they may need to know to help them to be successful, and really building an onboarding program that supports that. Granted, there may be some places where the new and experienced onboarding can overlap because there's just fundamental things that everyone needs to know. But we had a couple of firms share specifically what they're doing in this space, and then had some really great group discussion about how they can focus on continuously improving that to meet the needs of both groups.
I mean, it was a really great conversation, and you did a great job just summarizing that. What's also interesting is, if we were to categorize what you were just talking about as managing the effectiveness of the onboarding for both new hires and experienced hires, there was also a lot of discussion around managing the frequency and the cadence of the entire process. One firm got up and shared how they're onboarding new people every other Tuesday. And so not only are L&D leaders trying to increase the effectiveness of the onboarding, but also just the overall cadence and the quantity of onboarding that's happening. How do we get more efficient while not reducing the effectiveness, and being able to standardize some of the approach to it so we increase our likelihood of those new hires sticking around for the long term.
Yes, and even to make sure that we're giving the space that the experienced hires need to ask those more advanced level questions. So some interesting discussion around that. But then even the more simple ahas, like onboarding doesn't always have to happen on Monday. And it became several firms had, as you mentioned, their onboarding happening on Tuesday, and that gives more space on that Monday to set up for it and to be prepared. So when firms get together and have conversations, there are a lot of insights that can surface, but I thought it was particularly interesting to have this conversation around onboarding new hires versus experienced hires.
Yeah. Now, it's often during our circle meetings, we end up discussing topics, even if they're planned or unplanned, that could be categorized as like ahas or like, wow, we knew we were going to be talking about that, but we have a whole different perspective now on that topic than maybe we even knew we were going to be getting to. Is there any topic like that, Arianna, from your perspective, you feel like we hit on?
I think one that really stuck out was our session on assessments and understanding first the difference between assessments and evaluations, and then the work that our L&D leaders are doing to really assess the learning that's happening. So it's one thing to deliver the learning. Another important part of the L&D leader's role is to make sure that it was actually effective. And so one of the firms shared a number of different ways that they're approaching that and assessing in a way that really aligns with effectiveness, and then talking about different ways to deliver the learning that can help to proactively increase that effectiveness. And an aha for me was really thinking about the level of risk that you're having with your training, and essentially if people feel uncomfortable in the environment where they're learning, that it can make their learning less effective. So she talked quite a bit about how you reduce the risk that comes along with learning new things, sharing what you're learning, finding ways to respond and show that you're comprehending the materials in a way that doesn't make you feel as vulnerable. And so there's so much thought that our L&D professionals are putting into thinking about the types of learning that they're creating, how they're proactively making it effective, and then how they're actually assessing to make sure that it's meeting the mark and that people are absorbing, retaining, being able to relay what it is that they've learned.
Yep, absolutely. And in our last few minutes here of this conversation, we often ask ourselves or kind of reflect on what are firms going to be doing differently after this meeting than before. Mm-hmm. And so I was in a breakout group as we ended our time together with a subset of the circle members, and they were really talking about how they're going to maybe develop new relationships inside the firm or enhance those relationships inside the firm to increase the alignment that's happening in terms of, let's say, maybe service line leaders where they see the vision of their service lines going and how L&D is able to support that. Mm-hmm. And it feels like with each meeting that we have for the Learning and Development Circle, that each meeting they're climbing an additional rung in terms of influence within the firm, and we don't really see that slowing down. And in a lot of ways, they're taking the position where they're not only having a listening ear open to others in the firm in terms of maybe how they can support the firm, but they're actually speaking up more around and even challenging maybe some status quo thinking on the type of learning and development that needs to be happening, and really challenging the rest of the firm to think at a higher level in terms of the types of capabilities the firm needs to be developing in-house. So when I think about what firms are doing differently from this circle meeting, that's kind of where I'm going. Anything you would add?
I would add just the importance of the strategic focus of learning and development. A lot of conversation about how, while we understand the importance of the place of CPE, but that it's more strategic as we're looking at building well-rounded people within our organizations, within our firms, and really how L&D leaders are being advisors to those in those different service line areas to help them to understand what is the best course of learning, not just what is going to check our learning boxes. And I agree that within this group, as they continue to learn from each other, as they continue to challenge themselves within their roles, we really aren't seeing advisory just happen externally. We're seeing that advisory capability happening internally, especially with our learning and development leaders.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is all our time that we have for this conversation. If you are intrigued by any of the topics Arianna and I just discussed, you may be a candidate for the Learning and Development Circle. So if you're interested in learning more about this group And if it's a good fit for you or someone in your firm, go to boomer.com. You'll see circles right at the top of the website. You can simply click on that. You'll see Learning and Development Circle, and you can learn more about the community. You can even submit an application form to be considered to join the group. But we would love to see you here in Kansas City or online for the Learning and Development Circle. Thank you so much for listening.